What we're looking at here is the well-known choice that is offered to us by agents of the law when they arrest us. When I say well-known, I suppose I should qualify that and say it's well-known to those who get arrested. Well-known to criminals and delinquents, etc. So, what policemen very often say, they're quite fond of saying, is, look mate, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, when they're arresting you. What this means, obviously, is that they're going to bring you back to the station for due processing, and you can either come along nicely and everything will be relatively pleasant and amicable, or you can put up a fight, in which case you're still going to come to the station and get processed, but the experience won't be so much fun, and they might have to quieten you down a bit and knock a bit of sense into you and just ensure that you do what they want you to do, even though you're trying as hard as you can to do the opposite, i.e. not go to the station. And aside from the physical side of being compelled to comply like that, emotionally it's distressing. So this is a well-known scenario, and we all understand it. So we can do it the easy way or the hard way. So the implication is it's entirely up to us. Not just an implication, it is entirely up to us. It's no skin off the policeman's nose either way. It's no bother to them. And they're completely easy about it. After all, it's us that will suffer if we choose to go the hard way. So anyone with any basic degree of cop on obviously is not going to fight in a situation like that, because we can see that there's clearly no point. And not only is there clearly no point, we are creating a very, very disagreeable experience for ourselves. So this principle can be generalized beyond the very particular scenario of being arrested, and we all find ourselves in that scenario in relationship to reality itself. Not to say that reality is like a policeman, although in a sense that's what I am saying. Reality gives us this choice, and it really doesn't care which way we do it. It's all the same to reality. As Richard Bach says somewhere, not exactly these words, reality is sublimely indifferent. So reality is sublimely indifferent, but we aren't indifferent. It makes a lot of difference to us. So then the question is, what is it that we have to go along with or comply with? What does reality want from us? Not in the sense that it's actually requiring anything from us, but in a kind of more metaphorical sense, what does it want from us? And there are several ways we could answer this. One way is to say that reality requires of us that we let go of our illusions. That being the nature of reality. That's what it means to be reality. Reality always trumps any illusion. So we could say that there's these two things. There's the inevitability of letting go of our illusions, and there's our infinite resistance to doing so, which is very much the same thing as Gurdjieff's saying, as the saying of Gurdjieff, which I mentioned the other day, where Gurdjieff says that there are two things that are infinite in this world, one being the mercy of God, and the other being the stupidity of human beings, or of man. So between those two, it's kind of like the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, which they used to like talking about at one point. Although no one seems to talk about it that much these days. But it's roughly the same kind of thing. Anthony de Mello. I'm pretty sure Anthony de Mello says something similar. He says, he gives a kind of a rather neat and snappy definition of enlightenment. And he says, enlightenment is cooperation with the inevitable. So we won't go into enlightenment about too much. We won't dwell over much on this thing called enlightenment. Enlightenment is a thing that the ego gets very excited about. So the ego loves to talk about enlightenment. As far as the ego is concerned, enlightenment is a very special, sublime egoic state. A kind of egoic state in which the ego is ultimately validated, which is a kind of weird way of looking at it, but that most definitely is the way that the ego looks at it, because the ego always has to see it, or the self always has to see things in terms of itself. So if it's a very, very great state, obviously it must be a great state that it can avail of, or which will be to its advantage. So I guess you could say that the ego or self is always kind of aware of its own muckiness, really, its own trickiness, its own fundamental lack of honesty. And it's aware of this taint, even though it fights against it, or fights against the awareness. It's aware of this taint. And it dreams of being free of it. So for the ego, enlightenment is like being free of this taint of unworthiness that it has to live with all the time. It's a whiter than white ego, as if it's just been put through the wash with new improved Persil or something. It's a worthy ego. And what could be greater than that for the ego? Anyway, so that's a bizarre kind of a thing to get into, really, so we won't go into enlightenment. But it's very interesting what Anthony de Mello says about cooperation with the inevitable. Cooperation sounds to us like a bit of a dodgy word. It sounds like conforming or colluding. It doesn't feel right to us somehow to cooperate necessarily. It always kind of sounds like we're selling out. And generally, when we do cooperate with some power that's greater than us, it is selling out, it is conformity. It is a dirty or despicable act, as we're all guilty of to some extent or other. But the inevitability that we're cooperating with is different. Because what we're talking about is the inevitability of letting go. We're going to have to let go at some point. Because all there is letting go. All there is letting it go because there's nothing to hold on to. So that means, of course, letting go is all there is. So there we have a perfect example of inevitability. It's inevitable that we're going to have to let go. Because what we are trying to hang on to isn't really there. So there could be no question about that. No question about the inevitability there. But it's not that we're being asked to conform to anything. What systems do is they offer us a final reality and they browbeat us into believing that it's a final reality and compel us to conform to it. And they are trying to make out that it's inevitable that we have to conform to it, so we might as well just go ahead and do it. So what all systems are trying to do, what all systems are doing is lying to us. They're lying to us by saying that something is a final reality when there is no such thing as a final reality. So that's exactly what organisations do. That's what society does. It offers us the final reality of what it says life is and should be about. And also, it offers us the final reality of who it says we are as the person who lives this life that we have been presented with. And it really does browbeat us into accepting this. And so it could be said that we cooperate. But this isn't an inevitability at all, because it's not true. There are no final pictures, so what we're really doing is we're buying into a lie. And if we're buying into a lie, then necessarily we're in denial of the truth. So by adapting to the system, and the system, as well as being society, it's our own thinking mind. Society and the thinking mind are the same thing, as David Bohm says. So by adapting to the thinking mind, or adapting to the reality that it presents us with, we have been co-opted into denying reality. Now obviously we're presented with rewards for conforming. But no matter what these rewards are, they can hardly make up for the very untenable position which we have now put ourselves in, which is the position of being in denial of reality. That's not a good position to be in. It's not a good position to be in because what's happening now, reality said to us, you can do this the easy way or the hard way, whatever. It's up to you. So when we conform to a system or to a final reality that's been presented to us by society or the mind, and we're also offered rewards for doing this, incentivization is taking place, then what we're doing, we're opting to do it the hard way. And no matter what puny little incentives we might be being offered, they don't really matter at all when compared to the incalculable misery and suffering that comes with being dragged kicking and screaming in the direction that we don't want to go, which is the direction of, we could either say, moving into reality or letting go of our illusions. And at no point in this process do we know that this is what's going on. We don't see ourselves as fighting reality, and we don't see ourselves as holding on to our illusions. all we see is something very frightening, some very frightening possibility. So because we have denied reality, it's no longer reality to us. It's not anything to us because we don't allow ourselves to think about it. But it's there all the same because we can't really get rid of it. There's no handy way to get rid of reality. And what we've done is we've turned it into a force that is acting against us. Really, we are acting against it. It's just acting. But from our subjective perception, it's this immensely powerful force that's acting against us and undermining everything we value and cherish, undermining our sense of ourselves, our sense of who we believe we are, and everything we believe in and all the rest of it. So it's a big package, all the package we've bought into because we think it'll give us something, or seems to be that it can give us something. We put all our money on that horse because somehow, obviously, we had a notion that the horse would come in. We were told, we were given a tip, this horse is going to come in. Do you know, if you've got any money, borrow some off friends, take out an overdraft, whatever the hell, this horse is going to come in. So everything's hanging on this horse coming in, and this is not a horse that's ever going to come in because, I mean, you could say it's a horse with no legs, but it's actually a horse that isn't anything. It's an unreal horse. It's never going to get anywhere. So the whole experience of discovering that we've put our money on the wrong horse, which we react to that dawning awareness by fighting ever harder to get ourselves to believe that it is okay, it's going to work out, and then all of our friends agree with us because we're all in the same situation. So we create a collective system of denial, and we're all telling each other, yes, we're doing the right thing, this is good, this is going to work out. Which on the face of it seems like a smart trick, because when you've got thousands and millions of people in the buying into the denial, the system of denial too, that makes that system really, really strong. Really believe in it. You can really easily believe in it. It's like the old thing you used to say in the adverts, well, 10 million people can't be wrong. How could 10 million people be wrong? How could 100 million people be wrong? Of course, if we thought about it a bit more, we'd think, well, how could 10 million people be right? How could 100 million people be right? Any amount of people that agree together on something, you know one thing, and you know that what they're agreeing is true, is a lie. All agreements are lies. All collective realities are lies. So, very cleverly, and our cleverness is a type of cleverness that's not really clever because it's against us. We've put ourselves in this situation. We are being dragged kicking and screaming. And when the cracks start to appear in the firmament and the plaster starts to fall off the roof, and you can see that things are starting to give way, and it's all starting very subtly at first to come undone, in a psychological sense that is, then we come to a point where we come into the arms of the mental health services. And so, because the mental health services are constituted of people who are equally in this state of denial, who are also colluding in the system of denial, they're going to pour on the denial extra thick. And the way they're going to do this is by saying, it's okay, we can fix it. We have got all these scientific methods at our disposal. We've got CBT, even though CBT is getting a bit passé these days. There was a time when it could fix anything. You'd go and see your GP and he'd say, CBT, because there's a magic. There's a magic to it because it represented the power that we have to paper over the cracks or to plaster over the cracks. Even though the better we are at papering over the cracks, the more traumatic it is. Papering over the cracks isn't really the way to go. It's just adding an extra finesse to the suffering that we're going through. We're finessing the suffering. So, just in case the suffering wasn't torturous enough, we've created new, undreamt of refinements of suffering. You could probably put it a better way than that, but I can't think of any better way of putting it at the moment. We're elaborating our suffering, and we're ever creating more refined ways of experiencing it, under the guise of fixing or under the guise of helping things. So then that raises the question of what the helpful thing to do would be, either thing that isn't finessing our suffering and making it even more exquisite. And of course what that comes down to is, in the first place, recognizing what's going on, and in the second place, because we now have an awareness of actually what's going on, not investing absolutely so much in the desperate and doomed attempt to fix the structure or fix ourselves, that we still are going to be struggling. But what we can do is not believe in that struggling, our own struggling, so much. So we're struggling automatically by reflex. We carry on kicking and screaming. We carry on resisting. But there's a part of us which knows, which is actually copping on a bit to what's going on. So we can see ourselves struggling and kicking and screaming. But at this point we're not identifying it with it 100%. Maybe we're identifying it with it 90% or 80% or whatever. But the fact that we're no longer wholly identifying it with it makes a world of difference. We've actually moved from unconscious suffering into conscious suffering. Okay, thanks for watching.